So how have you been?
Cool. Good. Good. Lots of stuff with work, but it's been still been good. How about you?
Yeah, also good.
Nice.
Um, you know, minor challenges, but that's part of life, right?
Yeah.
I can't say
Right. If
that.
we didn't have any challenges, things would get really boring really quick, probably. So,
Probably, yeah, and there'd be no like catalyst for growth, right? I mean, I feel like you
yeah,
kind of need some tension in life in order to create some friction, you need friction for fire. So,
very true.
um
Ooh, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
yeah, can't say I came up with it. It's not mine or anything. I probably heard it somewhere, but it seems to be true, right? I mean, if everything is easy and there's no challenge, it's like there's almost no drive or no purpose in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. No evolution can happen.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason we have everything we have on this planet is because of everything trying to fit into whatever little niche it was in. Yeah.
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 Very interesting. So what did you want to talk about today? Because I know we got a pretty good like baseline going our last conversation, even though it was cut short. So did you have anything in mind that you wanted to talk about specifically? Do you want me to just like fire off questions? What were you thinking?
Oh man, I mean, really, I'm good. I'm good with whatever. Like, I wrote down some topics we can touch on if we want to, but I'm happy to do literally whatever. I don't do great with like a script, so I'm great just going off. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear your topics. I think I'm like you. I don't want to have every word scripted, but I like having topics or themes or like almost like an assignment, like here's a
Yeah.
question or here's a topic. So yeah, why don't we go through and see some of the topics that you wrote down, and maybe we
Cool.
can just start there.
Okay. Okay, so the things I wrote down, ancient religions, journeying slash like that other place you get to when you're journeying, who, what, and why we're here, death, and the future.
Wow, I think those are four great topics for us to tackle today. I feel like you run the gauntlet there.
Big stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I and they're all fascinating topics that I'm very much interested in, so I think you picked very wisely.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So why don't we start with ancient religions? Because again, that's right up my alley. I've got a bookshelf behind me full of books, many of which are from ancient spiritual traditions, philosophical traditions. And so it's something of an interest of mine and has been since I embarked on this path. So what's
Awesome.
your relationship to ancient religions, keeping in mind that you come from, shall we say, a fundamentalist background?
Yeah.
How have ancient religions influenced you before and after your awakening?
Oh man. I've always been really into mythology. In like fifth grade, we started talking about like Greek and Roman mythology, and that was like it for me. That was one of the most like mind blowing. Like I super loved it from the get go. And then as I got older, like I had studied Greek and Roman mythology. I got older, I got really into Egyptian mythology. Um, and that's kind of what led me into anthropology, is what I went to school for. And I focused on ancient Middle Eastern religions. So that like that whole area of the world has always fascinated me, like the dawn of civilization and the dawning of religion in civilization. um, so yeah, I was always super fascinated about it, like logically from a really rational point of view. But then as like my spirituality started to get more intense, um, it definitely like for me when I journey, I see deities that come and visit me. And just in looking at ancient religion now versus 15 years ago or whatnot, I see it so much differently now. I think our whole interpretation of ancient mythology is flawed. um, I think a lot of ancient religions were anthropomorphizing like ideas or elements or feelings into like humanoid characters that we could then identify with. I don't think they really thought that like Zeus was up in the sky throwing around lightning bolts. I think that they named thunder and lightning storms Zeus. Like that's what was had. Zeus was angry that day, and that's why you're having these crazy storms. So I think they were instead of like scientific terms how we use them today, like in ancient times, because the best way to remember things was also mnemonic devices.
Yeah.
And so if you create a story around an idea or a belief or a phenomenon, it's a lot easier to remember that information in a story form than it is just facts listed at you. um, So yeah, like that's how I view a lot of ancient religions now, is that and it's just like up to us now, I feel like, to decode what they were really saying. And so
Hmm.
that's endlessly fascinating to me, trying to like really get into what they were trying to convey versus they just think it's some dude up in the sky.
Yeah, so you said like the way that we interpret ancient myth is kind of skewed, and so I can only assume that you're referring to kind of what they call the exoteric interpretation of mythology, which is like a literalist interpretation. Like
Yeah.
an exoteric reading of the Garden of Eden is that there really was a place on Earth thousands of years ago where a god came and made a dude out of dirt and blew breath into his lung. Like that's the
Yeah.
exoteric. The esoteric is, well, this commemorates a leap in the evolution of consciousness in human beings from an animal state to a self-conscious dualistic state where we can see opposites, or where we frame reality in terms of opposites. And so that's the esoteric reading of
Yeah.
that story. And so what you're saying is that in your opinion, the ancients were a lot wiser and smarter than we think, and they weren't just trying to explain nature with these what we would consider to be primitive stories. They were actually creating rich metaphors for all kinds of things, whether natural phenomenon, internal psychological phenomenon, and that these myths actually can teach us about these things in a metaphorical way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And did you pick that up from academia, from studying this stuff in college, or is this something
Oh,
that you kind of came to after college, where you were on your spiritual path?
Oh, it was definitely after college. Yeah, I didn't get, and I mean, I was in college a while ago, so it was like things they may have, I don't know what they're teaching now. But yeah, no, I definitely didn't get this in college. This was definitely more through my own like personal research. And yeah, my own personal like once my views changed, then the way I viewed this whole ancient religion thing changed as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so we're talking about myths, but we're also talking about things like the gospels, right? Which are essentially
Mhm.
myths. We don't know for a
Yeah.
fact whether or not these things happened. They might have, they may not have. But the
Mhm.
idea, according to you, and I agree with you on this, is that whether it happened or not is irrelevant. They
Yeah.
contain essential truths that are actually very valuable to us, even today, all these years removed.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, out of all the ancient religions that you've studied, what are some of the ones that resonate with you and that have provided you with guidance in the last few years since you've been on this path?
Oh man. Let's see. Well, one of the things that's really like been powerful for me has been like the whole concept of like duality between the masculine and the feminine.
Mhm.
Um, for me, that's been a constant struggle to balance my internal masculine and feminine. One tends to outweigh the other, and sometimes they kind of trade off. And so in kind of wanting to figure out the best ways to help me balance my own masculine and feminine. I've dived into a lot of like how masculinity and femininity were portrayed in a lot of ancient religions,
Okay.
and some of the things I've found, especially in really ancient religions, it's clear in like Hinduism and Egyptology and like ancient Sumerian religions. They had a lot of very feminine men and a lot of very masculine women.
Mhm.
Um, and so like getting into that, like Inanna is one of my favorite deities. She's an ancient Mesopotamian deity. She was around for a really long time. And she was a goddess of war, but not there's a difference in ancient gods and goddesses that were related to war. They were either like proactive in war, like you were mounting the assault, you were attacking someone else, you were the
Conquering.
attacker. Yeah. Or there was the more defensive protective type where you were defending your land, your peoples, whatever. And she was a defensive warfare type of goddess,
Mhm.
which most female goddesses of war were defensive warfare. Um,
Would
and so
Athena
she's
be considered a female goddess of war as well then?
Yes,
Yeah, and
definitely.
and
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 she was
also the
very,
goddess of wisdom as well, which is
yeah,
kind of interesting
yeah.
dichotomy there.
That's a lot. A lot of these ancient like war goddesses had war, but they also had wisdom.
Mm.
They had a lot of knowledge. Inanna was the goddess. She was like the Prometheus in a lot of ways of the ancient Sumerians. She brought down wisdom and knowledge to humans. She brought down the knowledge to, for mathematics, the knowledge to build and construction, the knowledge for agriculture, the knowledge for fire, like all of these things that make civilization, which is also really common amongst a lot of ancient female deities, is that they are kind of the ones who create and or maintain society and civilization and all of those skills related to needing that you need to have in order to have a successful society. Most of those were the women, were female deities. Yeah, and so Inanna, yeah, she's this goddess of protective warfare, of like knowledge and wisdom. She brings things to people. She was also an ancient protector of like non-traditional people, like LGBTQIA kind of. She
Right.
had a temple that was specifically for that welcomed any non-binary peoples into it, and she was very protective of them.
Because she
And
herself was in a way non-binary, right? In a
yes,
sense, because like you were saying, her masculine energy was quite strong. So you have this kind
yes.
of interesting portrayal there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, she's also a goddess of sex, but not like a fertility goddess. She's a goddess of like sex for pleasure,
Right.
which is we think of as a much more masculine kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, I think in large part she was a goddess of passion. You have passion with pleasurable sex. You have passion when you're defending your family. You have passion when you're protecting other people. Passion for educating and for sharing knowledge. So I think she's like largely an embodiment of passion. But there are a lot of ancient deities that are like this throughout a lot of other religions. Hinduism has a lot of really really strong masculine, female deities. So yeah, so seeing that kind of dichotomy in these very masculine women, and then the very feminine men. Dionysus has been one for me that's been that keeps recurring, where he was a god of like pleasure and of wine and of drinking, and we kind of think of him as this like, it was just debauchery. It was all he was really into, but he was also a god of these like these mysteries, these
Yes.
Dionysian mystery schools. He had a lot of stuff that we don't that they didn't write down what happened in there, so we really don't know. But he was very peaceful. He was very kind of free love like, and so he was a much more like feminine, male deity.
And
Um,
many of his followers were women as well, right? Like he
yes,
was always portrayed as being surrounded by women and
yeah, yeah,
yeah, so
Maenads and
yeah.
yeah, all
No,
kinds
that's
of
so fascinating. Yeah. I wish we could go through those mysteries today. I would, because there's so many of those mystery schools that like you said, it's all lost, right? We'll never know unless it's like through the accounts of people who went through it and maybe they wrote stuff down. But I wonder what kind of stuff they taught. I imagine it's the perennial philosophy that's kind of at the core of every great tradition. But to go through it and to experience it in a ritual form, that would be trippy. I would love to do that.
Yeah, right? Wouldn't that be so cool? Like,
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident they involved like plant medicine of some
Mhm.
form. Um, so
Or
yeah,
what the other theory is that there's a certain grain that would get some kind of mold on it and it would
yeah,
cause like mass hysteria, and it's happened throughout history. And so
yeah.
one
That
theory
was
is
the
that they
witch.
used, yeah,
Yeah, the witch trials, they think were probably that. Yeah, this kind of wheat that develops this mold that sends you into crazy hallucinogenic visions and things.
yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, they used all, in ancient times, they knew so much more about like plants than we do. We have removed ourselves from nature so much that we're like looking at it through this third weird third lens, this removed place.
yeah,
Where for hundreds of thousands of years, they had to if you find an indigenous tribe somewhere now and you ask them about the plants, they can tell you everything, every use every plant in their area possibly has. And so I think it's entirely possible they had types of hallucinogens that have been lost to time or that have gone extinct
yeah.
because of use. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was a plant medicine based way to reach. Um, and a lot of those mystery schools too, I think the Gnostics kind of were the same thing, where it's that like God inside of you that you're
Yes.
trying to reach.
Yeah.
So I think that's what a lot of them were.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
my
that,
take on it.
yeah. And it seems like it doesn't matter what tradition you start in. Like a guy like Meister Eckhart was a Christian monk, but when you read what he wrote about his sort of visionary states and his mystical experiences, or you compare that to somebody from an Islamic background like Rumi, right? Or Ibn
Mhm.
Arabi, they were considered Sufi mystics, but that comes from the Islamic line. If you follow your traditional path long enough, I believe it will lead you to mystical union with the one, whatever name
Yep.
you want to give it. And even science, you follow
Yeah.
science far enough. I mean, you read what some of these quantum physicists were writing when they were first getting into this stuff and realizing that particles are actually not particles and that, it's all just energy waves and probabilities. And they were like, shit, we started off as atheists, but here we are. Here we are, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so to me, it all comes back to this. But I think what
Yeah.
happens is, people take a path or they identify with a path and they stop along the way and they think they've reached the destination.
Hmm.
And so they're like, well, this is the destination and Christianity is the ultimate truth. And but keep going,
Yeah. Yeah.
keep going and see where it takes you, because you'll find that you'll end up with everybody else at the very top there.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. I think all modern religions we have now are all pieces to the puzzle, and
Yes.
our challenge is, can we learn to work together enough to put all those pieces together and see the whole puzzle? Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, Rumi, I think, uses the analogy. He says, a Hindu brought an elephant into town at night, and he brought it into a dark room, and then one by one he led villagers into the dark room, and each one was like, "Oh, it's a trunk-like creature. No, it's a like a very strong pillar. One of them's feeling the leg, one of them feeling the tail. They're all describing it differently based on their feeling of the animal, but it's just one elephant, right? It's just
Yeah.
one religion, one truth." But we're all
Yeah.
groping in the dark and going, oh, it's a cross. Oh, it's a, swastika.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a this, it's a that. It's like, no, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've come to that conclusion, because I feel that when you look at religion through this lens, the lens that you're describing, what we might call the esoteric lens,
Mhm.
you get far more out of it than if you're reading it as a literal historical document, right?
Oh, so much more, because it redirects your attention back into yourself, I think, or to the universe, like however you want to look at it. But yeah, yeah,
There's also something to be said for like reading a book and not asking someone else what it means. Like
yes.
one of my favorite ancient texts, is the Tao Te Ching.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you understand it, you don't understand it. That's the whole fucking point of the Tao Te Ching. He even tells you in the first verse, the Tao that can be named is not the true eternal Tao. If you can
Yeah,
name it, that ain't it. It's beyond naming. It's a mystery, right? But,
yeah.
so reading that and reading different translations of it and getting different like sort of nuances through it, it's like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe some expert will come along and tell me my entire interpretation is wrong, but it's my interpretation and it feels
Yeah,
true and it helps me in my life. So it's like, what are we looking for, right? Are we
yeah,
looking for capital T truth according to some academic, or are you looking for your truth that resonates with you and that helps you become your best self, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah.
What was the second topic on your list? Because
Ooh.
I feel like we're kind of, was it journeying? Because I feel like we're kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah, we're
so
kind
we
of
talked
going there.
about the mystery schools and the,
Yeah.
so there's the ancient religions that are kind of, according to us anyways, telling you the same thing, leading you within to that
Hmm.
experience of union. And then, of course, there's these plants and these substances that you can consume that will basically fast track you. You don't have to meditate for 100 years. You don't have to read all these books. They're going to give you the experience right away. And so, where do you think that fits into the big picture of what we're talking about here?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I definitely think ancient people. I'm a big fan of the stoned ape theory, where our pre-human ancestors were following big game around the savannah, in large part to eat the mushrooms that grew out of their shit, um, and that's probably. I mean, it's very likely that could have given us consciousness, the thing that separates us from the other animals on this planet. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and we know for thousands and thousands of years that humans have been using plant medicine. We found it in burials that are, 5, 6, 7,000 years old. We find it depicted on walls. Like, we know this is a thing that people were into. And so yeah, coming from that background and thinking that it is part of what gives us consciousness. Yeah, I definitely think, and I have some weird theories on all of, especially mushrooms and all of that and where all of that plays in. But yeah, I think it's something that we as a species have been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. I think we have receptors in our brains intentionally that are made to receive those things because we've been doing them for so long. And it clearly does something for us beyond just giving us consciousness. Like, what is this place that we get to when you're journeying, whether it's through meditation or through plant medicine? Like, what is that place that you get to? Because when you describe it, everybody who's been there knows what you're talking about. Like,
Yes, totally.
how amongst, billions of different humans can we get to this same place? Yeah, I think that is so fascinating.
Well,
I didn't like answer the question at all. I just took it on
no,
some weird turn, but
no, it's good. It's not a weird turn at all. I also am a big fan of the stoned ape theory. I think it's one of, I think it's probably a significant factor in our evolution. I don't think it's the
yeah,
only thing, but I
yeah,
think there's a number of catalysts, but it makes a lot of sense that our ancestors, I mean, this is what they did, right? Like, how did they figure out what plants killed them and which plants were good?
yeah,
Trial and error,
yep,
and
yeah,
we're the descendants of the ones who ate the right plants by luck
yeah,
because we're here. So
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, you're following these big herds and you're hunting them, and all of a sudden you're seeing these mushrooms growing out of their poop.
yeah.
Let's have a
I
little
even
nibble.
I don't even think we were hunting the animals when
Oh,
it
okay.
went. I think we were scavenging and we were just eating whatever grew out of their shit. Like, I think hunting is a newer
Oh
invention, but
yeah.
that's just my personal take. Like,
Oh
I
no,
don't
and you're probably
hunt
right.
that long, like, because it's a lot harder to hunt than it is to just scavenge. And so
Absolutely.
I think we were scavengers for a much longer time than we were
Yeah.
hunters. But
Yeah, early on for sure. I think you're right, and I think when hunting took off, then it was just a byproduct as well. But
mhm.
just to tie back to ancient religions and myth, some of the most ancient mythological or spiritual like symbols are bulls, right, and
Yeah,
cattle, right,
yeah, yep.
and the
In a lot of
mushroom is also
religions.
another sacred symbol from ancient times that you see recurring all the time. So again,
Uh-huh.
just to add another sort of check mark on the stoned ape theory, it's like the ancients knew there was a connection there.
Yeah, right? Think about the cave art. Like, all the animals from 100,000 years ago, all the animals they were painting on the cave walls. Like,
And these are
yeah,
not like, this isn't like you walk into a cave, like it's daylight and you walk into a cave and start painting. Like this was
yeah,
deep, pitch
yeah,
black, like complete darkness. And like when they discovered it, they were like, they were using floodlights. Our ancestors didn't have floodlights. They
yeah.
were just tripping in the dark.
Yeah. I just read something recently that was somebody's theory that, like, that the multiple, when you see, like, there one of the caves that has like multiple lion heads on it, and there, or you see it with horses, you see it with all kinds of things where there's multiple of them right next to each other. They think it really was because the painters would get kind of high, go in there, and then with the firelight, the way the firelight would look on the
uh,
wall, it would look like they were moving. So it would look like
oh,
one
wow.
creature moving across the wall.
Like
So
animation,
yeah, yeah,
ancient
exactly.
animation.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
right,
wild.
right.
Wow, I did not know that. I did read one study that was probably about 10 years old now, where they had people doing in an experiment. They had people doing psychedelics. I think it was LSD or something, and then they were doing drawings, and they were
Yeah,
comparing the patterns and the sort of recurring themes of those drawings with the cave art, and it was like, holy shit, those people were tripping for sure. It's like the
yeah.
same thing, right?
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah. I think our
So
ancestors were high a lot more often than we think
yes,
they were.
yeah, and I think it's continued all the way through. I mean, look at
Yeah,
us. We're
yeah,
we're always chasing something, some kind of high, whether it's through chemicals or through experiences or
yeah,
shopping, gambling, whatever, right? It's like
yeah.
it's all the same. But I want to hear you mentioned you have some crazy theories about mushrooms, and so I would be
Ooh,
curious to
okay.
hear what do you, because I'm having a microdose right now, so maybe you're gonna set
Me
me on a,
too.
yeah. So what's your theory on this, on the mushrooms? Where do you think they come from, or what's their
Okay.
purpose in us?
Okay, so this is gonna get weird. So mushrooms they found, like fungus, are older than plants or animals. Like we plant humans and plants come from fungus, I think.
Yep.
Like, I think fungus is the start of life on this planet was fungus. It was the mycelial network. I believe that literally the mycelial network is the nervous system of this planet, because I personally believe this planet is a living organism that has its own consciousness. Um, and I think this is the mycelial network is her nervous system, and how information is relayed. The more we study the mycelial network, the more we find that like massive amounts of information is relayed through that network, amongst fungus, amongst trees, amongst other plants. There's this huge communication network going on. Communication, sharing of nutrients, information about where predators are. Like if one plant's getting nibbled on over here, there's a whole alert system that tells all the nearby plants that like, hey, there's something that's like there's a predator out there. Like this massive communication network. And I believe, I mean, if we essentially our oldest form goes back to fungus, I think, and knowing that the earth is a living, I think she's a living organism. She's conscious of us. I think she enabled life to happen intentionally because she wanted to be a mother, and so she is aware of every living creature on this planet. And I think plant medicine and mushrooms in particular are a way of communicating directly into, I think it taps us directly into that mycelial network that is her nervous system, that is, you know, how she can communicate with us. Because like literally, like how would a tiny, you know, we're tiny specks on this planet, like this on this whole other life form. How would we communicate with each other? It's the same way of thinking, like, how do I communicate with my mitochondria? You know, how do my mitochondria communicate with me? Like, how would we even, you know, I am their whole world. How would we communicate? You know, and so I think that's what mushrooms and the mycelial network are. I think it is a huge connecting system that allows every other living creature on this planet to interact with the earth directly, to interact with each other. So I think that taps in when we microdose or when we journey, any kind of psilocybin kind of trip. And I mean, ayahuasca, I think is the same thing. All the plant medicines, I think, are essentially the same thing. But I think there's something like particularly cool about mushrooms that connect us directly to the earth herself and allow
Yeah.
us to have communications with her and with every other living thing on this planet.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's weird at all, dude. I guess we're
Well,
both
good.
weird. Yeah. And I don't think it's even that controversial what you're saying. I mean, some of it you're maybe extrapolating a bit, but where you're starting from is 100% like scientifically accepted. Like
Yeah.
the mycelium network and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that we're all descendants of fungus, that's pretty well established. Again, it's science, it's a theory, right? No, nothing is
Mhm.
100%, but
Yeah.
it looks pretty plausible
Yeah.
and pretty conclusive that fungi came first. So makes a lot of sense. And the other thing you touched on earlier too, which kind of ties back to this, is the fact that we have almost like a symbiotic relationship, because if we have receptors for like
Mhm.
cannabis, for example, we know that we have a long storied relationship with that plant. The fact
Mhm.
that when we take psilocybin, we have these experiences and we tap into the sort of global consciousness or even the cosmic consciousness, tells you again that we have this kind of relationship with the fungus, that we're made like, it's like pieces of a puzzle, right? Like when we take
Yeah.
it, it has this particular effect on us. So to me, it's like, you know, and again, to go back to kind of religion and you know, the idea that like drugs are bad and God doesn't want you to do these things. And it's like, well, who created these things and why did he
Yeah.
make them fit us so perfectly? And why did he, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you know,
Yep.
he made them for us, but we're not allowed to have them. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, guys.
And it's really only like the Abrahamic God that feels that way. A lot of the other ancient gods were not like they didn't care. Like drugs were fine. Like
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and again, it's maybe it's even more so the modern interpretation or the more
Yeah.
modern interpretation, because there's a book called actually I can't remember what it's called, but it has to do with Jesus Christ and the magic mushroom. There's some people who suggest that Jesus wasn't a person, but that it was actually just a mushroom, right? And then there's other people who
Oh,
think that, like, you know, the burning bush and stuff, he was like
yeah.
getting high, right? And came down with these
Yep.
visions. And it's like, you know, possibly, right? I mean, I've had
Yep.
visionary states without the help of psychedelic substances. So I can't stress that enough. I don't think it's the only way or the
Yeah.
only explanation for these things, but
Yeah.
it certainly is a good explanation,
Yeah.
because I mean, yeah, it sounds like he was tripping on that mountain. Like, come on.
It really does. Yeah. Like that's a lot of like their visionary kinds of things, like myself and people I know have had similar visions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Because you said, billions of people can take these substances and it brings them to the right to the same place, you said, right? And so
Yeah.
what do you think it is about that? And what do you think it is about these recurring visions of, certain goddesses or certain figures or archetypes? Like, where do you think that all comes from? Is it out there and we're tapping into it, or is it in us, or combination maybe?
That is the eternal question. Yeah, that's um I I don't know exactly. I don't know if it's something that's out there or if it's internal. I've been reading through the second time Carl Jung's The Red Book, um,
Nice.
where yeah he went through a series of these crazy visions, like a lot of it in the beginning of his career as a psychoanalyst, um, and like okay, let me see how I want to phrase this. Well, so his interpretation, like he ends up calling it the collective unconscious,
Mhm.
which like as far like that's kind of how I think of it, the collective unconscious. Like I have no idea like where it is because I do kind of feel like it's something inside, that it's an internal thing and an external thing,
Yeah.
but I think it falls under the realm of like time and space don't work how we think they do. So like internal and external space ideas, I think in this realm, like it doesn't matter if it's internal or external as much, like space doesn't function how we think it does in this place. Um, yeah, I mean, I think Carl Jung was right about some of the collective unconscious and these recurring archetypes that come up for almost everybody. Um, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm always so fascinated to talk to anybody else and see what anybody else like thinks about it, because it is one of those things that's so like I have no idea what it is,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the archetypes, the collective unconscious. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. When you go within yourself, if you go deep enough, you get to a place where space and time don't really jive anymore. It's not
Yeah.
really, and I also feel like that kind of explains a lot of things like tarot and
Yeah.
astrology and psychic phenomenon. Like a psychic is somebody who's just going so deep into the unconscious that they're now tapping into the shared reservoir of all historical people's knowledge and everybody that's alive
Yeah.
today. We are all drawing from this, like, the same well, right?
Yeah.
And what we get is like a little shot of water at the very end. Like, we don't get the whole bucket, but some people, they just are so open and they're just so in tune that they can drop right into that well and they can go swimming in it, and they can
Yeah.
pick up information that they should technically not never have known. But
Hmm.
it's because it's all there, it's at our fingertips. It's just we don't really know how to access it because we're
Yeah.
so locked into that rational conscious mind state that
Yes.
where I'm me and you're you, and I got to go at 10 o'clock, I got this, and you know what I mean. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to break all that down to get really deep into that reservoir, I think. But
Yeah.
again, that's not a scientific statement by any means. I mean, we're talking spirituality here, and yeah, I think maybe in time science we'll be able to quantify and measure some of these things, but I think at this point they're not quite there yet. So
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
yeah, and the archetypes seem to me to be just like aspects of every person. Like, everybody has all
Yeah.
the archetypes, and some of them might be dormant, and some of them might be dominant, and some of them might be repressed. But
Yeah.
everybody has all of them, and it's just a
Mhm.
matter of like how you how you express them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think and yeah, I think we have become so mind oriented and so logically focused, and so like even that we forget we're a whole being. We're more than just our mind.
Yeah.
We and I think this is a knowledge that we have forgotten. I think in ancient times we were much closer to source and we could dip into that more. I think psychic phenomena was more regular, because I think that's just where people lived more often. I think that's where animals live. I
Oh
think
yeah.
they live in this way and they communicate in all these ways that we don't really understand, that we can't really measure. And I think a lot of it exists in this other realm that we have lost connection to by becoming so brain and mind focused. And we
Yeah.
forget, we have a heart, we forget we have a body, we forget we have legs, we forget we have all of this rest of us that is also a living organism. And like our brain isn't the only thing that speaks to us. Like all of these other parts of your body can speak to you as well.
Yeah.
Um,
How about
which
your
is,
gut too, right? I mean,
oh
yeah,
yeah,
they're
oh you,
starting to show
oh man,
scientifically again that like a lot of your intelligence, quote unquote, comes from your
yeah,
stomach, your gut, not your brain, right? So
yeah.
it's
we have neurons in our guts, like literal brain cells in our guts. Like and I mean, I think all those little microflora that live in there, there's billions of little life forms that live in there, that we're living symbiotically with. And I mean, I think journeying is another way for like your whole body, for you to talk to your body. Like it's a way for us to connect to our bigger life form, the earth, but it's a way for the tinier things inside of us to connect to us and all of our organs, and literally like all of the knowledge that is inside your own body. I think journeying connects you to that as well. Oh shoot, I keep losing my train of thought. I keep going in one direction and then it turns off and goes somewhere else, and then I lose where I was trying to take it in the first place.
My apologies. I'm good at doing that too. I ask questions and then it's like you're in the middle of answering and I'm like, oh, I just thought of something. you just reminded me of something else I want to ask you, right? Yeah.
This is just gonna be like an exercise in ADD-ness.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm cool with that.
That's why I like that you came up with the topics, because it's like, all right, we've talked about this, we've talked about that. I think we're kind of getting lost now. So let's go to the next topic. What's next on the list, Deanna?
Let's see. Ooh, we kind of like went to this anyway, like what, who, and why we are, like why do we exist? Where do we come from? Yeah, which a lot of it, I think, I mean, it goes back to my whole theory about the earth as a living organism. I think she existed for billions of years before there was any life. Part of her consciousness, or however we want to describe it, I think she spent billions of years journeying through the whole universe, collecting all of these elements that she would need in order to create life. I think she then found a son that, you know, they got along well enough that she was like, okay, let's have this little marriage here. And so she, you know, got into orbit around this particular sun, the sun which functions as our father. Like the sunlight is the seed that comes down to the planet that helps give life to everything here. And she birthed all of life. I think this is what her intention was all along, was to be full of life, to be this mother planet. And I think that like all, you know, that she created all of us intentionally. And I do think that with humans, I think we were created. Oh man, it ties back into biblical stuff where in the Bible it says we're stewards of the planet.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what we were meant to be. I think our connection, our consciousness ties us subconsciously to the mother, where we are driven. I mean, humans are incredibly empathetic. We're incredibly willing to help. Like Mr. Rogers, you know, his mom said, like, anytime there's something bad that happens, look for the helpers. And you always find humans showing up for other humans, showing up for other animals, showing up for other plants. Like, I do believe that this is our inherent nature, is to be stewards of this planet, to take care of this, and to ensure her survival. Wow. That's my belief.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, it certainly seems to be when we're at our best is when we're taking care of each other and the planet. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting how there's two readings of that Genesis, right? Go forth and subjugate the earth, or take care of my garden, monkey. Yeah. Right? I prefer the take care of my garden monkey approach, because we live off the garden, we live off the planet, and it's like, if we destroy the mother, I mean, what happens to us? You know, like
exactly. How I think about this a lot. How cosmically embarrassing would it be if we really do like wipe ourselves out, and then in thousands of years some other alien species finds our planet and they're digging through everything and they're like, yeah, there was this really advanced species and they had a lot of really cool stuff, and then they just killed themselves and everything else on this planet. Like, how cosmically embarrassing, like how that we're killing ourselves and everything else that lives here.
More embarrassing is if they get into our social media and somehow are able to look at, and then they're gonna be like, oh, that's what happened. Okay, I see. Right? It's like, they weren't that advanced. I got it. Okay. I think technologically we're fucking amazing. I mean,
yeah, just really are.
We're amazing in general. Like, I'm not saying we're good. I'm saying like humans are, if you were like an outsider studying humans, you'd be like, holy fuck, these apes, man, they did some crazy stuff. Like, and it's all like based on, you know, to me, part of it is like we're rebellious. That's our ultimate nature in some way too, because like nature has equipped and outfitted every life form on this planet to fit a certain mold, to fulfill certain functions. We're not meant to fly. We're not meant to go underwater. We're not meant to be in space. We're not meant to do all these things. And yet we were like, too bad. We want to,
Yeah.
and we're doing it. We're curious and we're rebellious. And to me,
Yeah.
that's an essential part, because it's like most animals are like, I got these wings. I guess I'll just fly. It's like, we're like, well, I don't have
Yeah.
wings, but I want to fly, damn it. So I'm going to figure it out. It might take me thousands and thousands of years, but we're going to do it. And sure enough, here we are.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like that is so cool and admirable. But I feel like the technological evolution and the technological scientific evolution, like our understanding of things has evolved, but spiritually, we have not
We
evolved
regress.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we
I
have
think we've gone
regressed.
back. Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree. Yeah, I think humans are incredible. We're incredible animals. We really are. And okay, I'm going to take another little tangent here. We'll put a pin in this right
Yeah,
here.
do it.
So one of the things that really bothers me about our whole, I don't know, us in general as a society, we look back on ancient humans and we think like, oh, human nature is violence, it's aggression, it's
Greed.
dominance and greed, like that innately we are made up of all of these horrible things, essentially. Um, I have a wholly different theory. Like, really, if we were made up of all of those things, if that was our inherent most basic nature, we never would have developed society in the first place. We
Very
never
true.
could have had civilization. And we look back on, there were other like proto-humans before we were Homo sapiens sapiens. There were Neanderthals running around, there were Denisovans running around, there were a bunch of these proto-humans running around, and for a long time we thought like, oh well, Homo sapiens came along and we just killed them all. But in the studies we've been doing, we can do genetic testing now. We find like, no, we fucked them out of existence. We didn't kill anybody. We just incorporated them into us. We
Yeah.
just like, we are a combination. If you're Western European ancestry, you have 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Like, we fucked them out of existence. We are lovers, not fighters. Like, we didn't
Yeah.
beat them out of existence. We just bred them out of existence. They became part of us, and we
Yeah.
all became this one giant human family. That is our most basic nature, is lovers, not fighters. And the fact that you see so many more people showing up to help when bad things happen than you do people causing bad things to happen. Like, we have this really skewed idea of ancient history, because when we look at ancient history, a lot of it is like their wars, it's their battles, that's what they wrote down. But they wrote those things down because they were so scarce. Like, they were things that happened so rarely in history, and they were such a big deal that they wrote all of that down and passed everything along. It would be like if you came to the United States and the only thing we had written down was like the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, like 9/11. You'd be like, damn, these guys are really into war. Like, these guys, that's all they did. But really, we write those things down, we teach them in school because they were such big, important events that happened. And the same is true with ancient history. Like, the population was so much smaller, they weren't going around slaughtering people left and right. Like, human life was important. Like,
Yeah.
there were only so many of us, and life was already hard enough as it was. Like,
Yeah.
we really weren't going around slaughtering each other all the time. Murdering and raping and pillaging. Those are far more modern inventions than they are ancient inventions.
I agree. Yeah, and I think it's important to distinguish too between like we tend to think like ancient history like 5,000 years ago. We've been around for 200,000 years.
Yeah.
5,000 years ago is modern history if
Yeah.
you really think about it. 10,000 years ago is when modern human history begins with agriculture and sedentary civilization. Maybe further back than that, depending on if you're into some of the alternative sort of ancient origin theories of like, maybe there was an advanced civilization that got wiped out. But regardless, we're still talking about relatively recent in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah.
And for like 190,000 years, when we were just out there surviving in the wild with no villages and no civilizations, cooperation was the name of the game. I guarantee you there were very few conflicts back then.
Yeah.
We would trade with other tribes. We might not get along with all of them, but like you said, there were so few of us at that point that I really doubt that we were killing each other.
Yeah.
And to your point, when we were encountering people that were different from us, like Neanderthals and Denisovans and other proto-humans, we weren't killing them.
Yeah.
Well, we were mating with them and befriending
Yeah.
them and probably learning from them to some extent, because Neanderthals had cave cathedrals with skulls of bears and they were worshiping fire.
Yeah.
We might have learned religion from the Neanderthals. Maybe they're
The
the ones
old
who taught us to
burial.
eat mushrooms. Who knows, right? Like,
Yeah.
we really don't. But the truth is, I agree with you. I think the ultimate nature for humans for most of our existence has been collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of one another, communal living, like in
Yes.
the real sense of the word, where everybody has a
Yeah.
role, and women and men were a much more egalitarian footing. You know,
Yes.
they oversaw different aspects of daily living, but the women were in charge of certain things, the men were in charge of certain things, and the kids had their roles, and the elders had their roles.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no waste, right? Like now, if you look at
Yeah.
society, we dispose of our elders,
Yeah.
right? And like kids are like, be seen, not heard.
Yep.
And women, it's like, it's come a long way, but for a long time, it was like, just stay in the kitchen and blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
like it was never like that for like 99% of our existence. It wasn't like
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
So it's only once we settle down and we start growing our own food and having a surplus that
Mm-hmm.
things start to get a little bit tricky.
Yep. Once we start caring about land ownership, that's when things start. Land ownership and monotheism were two of the worst things that ever happened to women, especially.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, yeah, because before that, like it didn't matter, like, and it didn't even matter who your offspring, like if you were the father of your offspring or not, like
Yes.
we're all just raising children together. Like you had no
Yeah.
way of really knowing, like,
Yeah,
you
you knew
know,
your mother, but your dad,
yeah,
didn't matter because the whole tribe raised you, and it was
yeah,
just
yeah, the
everybody raised
whole
everybody.
group.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, everybody was responsible for everybody and played a life in everybody's roles. And now we're so disconnected. Like we disconnected ourselves from nature, and now we've disconnected ourselves from each other, like just from other humans. To where, yeah, we live in these giant cement boxes and we don't talk to anybody who lives on the other side of those walls.
Yeah, and
Like,
there could be a person like if I was in an
yeah,
apartment or something, there could be a person right across there from that wall, and I never know they existed, never talked
yeah,
to them. Yeah,
yeah.
we are very disconnected. It's very true. And disconnected from nature is, I find, interesting because, and this kind of goes back to the question of this topic, which is, who are we? I think it was Carl Sagan who said, like, we're a way for the universe to know itself or experience itself, right? And
Yeah,
so you're talking about Mother Earth, and I completely agree with you. I think there is a consciousness to Mother Earth. I think it is a living organism, just in the same way that you're a living organism made up of millions and billions and trillions of smaller life forms, bacteria in your
yeah,
gut and in your bloodstream. So I think that it just, on a bigger scale, that's exactly what we're doing here on the planet. We're just like, we're the gut bacteria of the planet,
yeah,
essentially, right? Or the
yeah.
brain cells of the planet. And so, but I think it goes bigger than that. I think it's the entire universe that's alive. I don't think it's
I
just planet
agree.
Earth, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just planet Earth. The sun is conscious. I think maybe not again in the way that we are, but I think the entire universe is conscious. And so it seems strange to me when we talk about nature as being separate from ourselves,
Yeah.
because you cannot separate us from nature. We are literally an expression of nature right
Yeah.
now, on Earth and in the cosmos. So it's, I have this conversation with my wife all the time about that's unnatural. And I always tell her, nothing is unnatural. If it exists in nature. And she hates that because she's like, you know what I mean? It's synthetic, it's fabricated, it's this, that. It all comes from nature. You can't get out of nature. Everything is
Yeah.
nature, right? You, me, this table, manufactured things, the dirt, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally everything. Yeah. Totally agree. Yep.
So it's like the
Yep.
disconnection then, if we are nature and we're in nature and everything is nature, the disconnection must be mental then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because I think part of it is because we're living so much in our heads, in our minds, in our brains. And your brain is this wonderful tool, but a terrible master. Where it's doing, if your brain's doing its job, it's thinking logically, it's thinking rationally, but it's also not taking anything from here down into account. Like
Right.
it's doing its own thing. And so I think by our society pushing, because we push logic, as like the highest form of existence. Don't be emotional, be logical. Like, don't feel your feelings, just use reason. When we are both, like, we are beings that are both. And I think our emotionalness is somehow more tied to nature. And by living in just this logical place, we think that we are literally above it or outside of it.
Oh,
Like we
yeah.
forget that we're a part of it because we forget our own bodies other than our heads. Like, so we forget the whole entirety of nature outside of just the human race. Um, Yeah, I think that has been a huge detriment to us is separating, is making ourselves just logical beings instead of logical and emotional
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I completely agree. I mean, that was well said. I think by doing that, we alienate ourselves.
Yeah.
We view ourselves as other than nature, as like this is
Mhm.
me and this is nature, and I'm inside my house and nature's out there. It's like
Yeah.
not quite,
Yeah.
not quite. It's a cool story, but that's not
Yeah.
really how it works. Sorry, like you're in nature right now, in your apartment, in your house, wherever
Yeah.
you are. There's no escaping it. If you exist, you exist in nature, and you are an
Yeah.
expression of nature. And like you, I agree. Humans are one of the coolest, most amazing expressions of nature that we've seen on this
Yeah.
planet. Just doesn't mean that we're good or that we're doing good things, but you have to admit, from a sort of academic standpoint, if you take a step back and pretend like you're studying this specimen, this animal called, Homo sapien, it's like, holy shit, what a crazy animal this is!
Yeah.
Like, woo!
Yeah, for real. Yeah, we are crazy, crazy animals. Yeah.
So I think this actually takes us to the fourth subject that you had written down, which I think is another one that is extremely important and isn't discussed enough these days by modern peoples, and that is the fact that every single person you know and have ever known will die, including
Yeah.
yourself, including me, including everybody that's ever lived before us. And
Yeah.
this is a topic of conversation that I have met a few people in the recent past online who are quite keen to talk about this stuff, and a couple guys in particular who seem to really think that confronting death is central to growth and living well. And I have to agree with them. And so, what are your thoughts on death and our view and relationship to death?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we have distanced ourselves from death, and I think that's part of our distancing ourselves from nature is
Mm.
distancing ourselves from death because death is an inherent part of nature. Every living thing on this planet will die. That's one of the things that we can always guarantee on about this planet is everything changes. Like nothing is forever stationary. Everything changes. Everything will die. Um, my I death isn't something that I had super thought a lot about for a long time, until I had my own experience with it over the last couple years. So from like the end of 2018 to like the end of 2019, I was pretty much bedridden. Like my whole body just started like falling apart. It's still we still to this day like doctors can't give me any real answers about what was going on. But I came very close. Like I could feel my whole body dying all around me. And it's funny that I hadn't been closer to death before this because I've had mental health concerns most of my life. I'd struggled with chronic like suicidal ideation since I was like 11 years old. Just something where it would just be a thing that I thought about all the time. Like, what if I just died? Like,
Oh wow.
but I guess I hadn't taken it much further than that because then when I was really presented with like, okay, I feel my body dying all around me, like I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to survive this or not. And um, I took plant medicine, listening to Trevor Hall, doing all the things I do to get into that place, and I went into it intentionally to go deal with this potential dying. And when I went in this deep journey, and I met death. And she presented herself to me as a woman, but just a skeleton, with a cloak that is the whole universe. Um,
Wow.
and we had a conversation, and she was essentially like, okay, like you can die if that's what you want to do. If you want to go, you can go. We'll make this happen. Like, or you can choose to live, but you have to make that choice. And so like I really had to make the choice, and it wasn't a choice I made easy because I was in a real bad place. Things were real rough, and my future was looking really bleak, and so I didn't know if that was a future I even wanted in my life. Anyway, so spoiler alert, like I chose to
You're
live.
here.
I'm here.
Yeah. You seem like you're well.
Yeah. So, like having my own experience with death left me with so much more space for it. Like I feel like it was something I hadn't created space for in my life, in my heart, in my mind. I just didn't. You just put it in this nice little box off to the side, and you don't really think about it again. But it was like after that, there was space for it. It had created this space inside of me where it was now something that seemed to live with me all the time. And so it went from something like living in this weird external place that was scary and dark and seemingly bad into living in this place near my heart where like I see the beauty in it. I don't know. It's really weird to describe.
Well, I
And then I
remember in
had
our first conversation, you mentioned the vision of death and how she was
yeah
smiling. She was smiling at you, right? But
yeah
you couldn't tell at first because she didn't have lips. So
didn't
it's
have a
like,
skin.
oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and that kind of visual is like that's the part of death that like lives in me where it's like, oh, she's this grinning skull, but you couldn't tell she was smiling and winking because she had no skin. And
Yeah,
like how hilariously ridiculous that is.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um
But you had dialogue with death, and you had a conversation with
yeah,
her, and so you essentially confronted death in a very experiential way. Like from your point of view,
yeah.
you confronted her, you had a conversation with her.
Yeah, yeah. And it was very much like not this grim reaper idea we have of this scary death coming at you. It was very loving. Like it was the same kind of like connectedness and love you feel in like a deep meditation where you just feel connected to everything. Death is a part of that. Like she also brings that same energy, that connectedness, that deep love. And just that you feel like it, and she felt supportive, like a friend, not like this scary grim reaper coming after you, but she was there as a friend to guide you from this place of living to this other place, to wherever we go when we die. She's there to act as a friend. Yeah, so I mean, and it is like just my whole feelings around death. Like I have no fear around death anymore. It's just another part of the journey. It's just another adventure. It's just another part of our existence. You know, the same thing you would have felt when like existing in the womb before you were born, birth would feel like death.
Yes, yes,
Like,
exactly. It's a
yeah,
transition. It's a transition
yeah,
from one state to another,
exactly.
and we just happen
Yeah,
to label it death. And again, it's this old left hemisphere that loves to label things, right?
yep,
It's like
yep.
that. You said it earlier. You said everything is always changing, and there's
Mhm.
a part of change that we have chosen to call death. And
Yeah,
we say when this type of change happens, it's death, and we think that it's an end. But ends and
yeah,
beginnings, they just go like this, right?
yep. It's
So
all just a circle. It's yeah,
absolutely, yeah. It's like death is the death brings life. I mean,
yeah,
it's so the fact that you encountered death and she was supportive and loving, it makes perfect sense because in a way, death generates life, and what can be
yes.
more loving than giving life, right?
Yeah,
Creating
destruction
life.
and creation are right there, right next to each other. It's yeah.
Yeah, we talked about ancient gods. I mean, Shiva is a
Mhm.
perfect example of that, right? She dances, she creates, and she destroys, and it's
Yeah.
all under one roof. It's all her job, and
Yep.
yeah,
And it's
so it's
all
very
beautiful and
fascinating.
magical and amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you can step back from it and look at it through the right lens, absolutely. But when your loved one is on their deathbed, or when you've lost somebody that's close to you, or when you yourself are in your situation that you were in a few years ago, when you think you might be dying, I think it's probably a little bit harder for people to see the beauty in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to go back to your story. So you were dealing with ailments that the doctors had no idea how to treat them. You
Hmm.
went and you had this journey. You journeyed into yourself. You encountered death. You had a conversation with death. You came to grips with death, and it ceased to be this thing that you were repressing. It became something that was open and acknowledged, and nothing to fear anymore.
Hmm.
And so, do you think that that was part of your healing then? You confronting death, you coming to grips with death, did that help you and your body heal from that state that it was in?
Yes, for sure. So with all like trying to figure out what was wrong with me, it the best like kind of answer that I came up with, like that I was able to find was that it was like physical trauma due to like years of emotional trauma. I had so much trauma that I hadn't really dealt with, so much pain, so much like psychological torment, and then throwing in all of the mental health concerns on top of that that I've been dealing with for most of my life. it got to the point where it was like too much for my body to take, which had you asked me about this a few years ago, I would have been like, no, that sounds crazy. Like your emotional state can't affect your physical state, but it definitely can. Um,
What
it
are
really,
emotions?
yeah,
Where
right?
do they exist?
Yeah.
You know, they're in your
What even
body.
are
They're
they?
physiological. Literally, it's a
Yeah.
physiological reaction, chemicals being released into your system.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, they're not some airy fairy thing that doesn't, they're not spirits. It's like, no, it's,
Yeah.
we're talking about your body. Emotions exist in the body, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but yes, I get it. And most people I think would be the same, I think, if you talk to them about
Yeah.
that.
This disconnect we have from our own body, like that's where I learned so much of this. Like, so really, like I spent a lot of that. So I was pretty much bedridden for about a year. Um, and so a lot of it was spent like in meditation and in kind of journeying and trying to figure out what was going on. And yeah, that was a big part of what came to me, is that I was so separated. I was living totally in my mind, totally in my head, and I wasn't even paying attention to any of my body at all. My body had been screaming signals at me for years that I had just
Yeah.
ignored. um, and this was the result of it, like because I had never learned how to really like feel my feelings and process them, let them come in and out of you, instead of holding on to them. Like especially my pain, I held on to my pain so tightly. It was something, because pain is something that's so intimate, it's so personal, it's something that only you know, you can never really describe to somebody else the pain that you're going through. So I think
Yep.
we have this tendency to hold it really close to our chest, to hold it onto our pain really tightly. Um, but it's the kind of thing that we need. It's there for a reason. It's, you know, but then we need to eventually like let it go its way, let it pass on and pass through. Um, and so yeah, I had been like holding on to this so tightly, and so it really was like once I started feeling, and this was before I had the conversation with death, but really feeling like, okay, I need to reconnect back to my body, I need to feel these feelings, I need to let these things out of me, very much. And then that's when things started to get better, or at least kind of started to make sense. Like things didn't get better enough, because I still had that conversation with death.
Yes.
It was still looking like I might be bedridden for the rest of my life. It was looking, I
Wow.
lost the use of my right arm. It was looking like that was just going to get worse. Like I was just going to slowly lose functionality. And so it was like, I don't know that I want to live it like this. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, so but yeah, for me it was absolutely like psychic wounds that were doing all of this damage. And so it was really having to go in and do a lot. Like I mean, I've been in therapy most of my life. I thought I had been working through a lot of this stuff, but clearly like it just wasn't enough. So yeah, I think that's something that like anybody going through health issues, like look at that as part of it. Like, what is it you're holding on to? Like, get really, really fucking real with yourself and
Yeah.
just
Well,
really
especially
go
if
into
you're
those.
desperate, right? Like if you're in a
Yeah.
really bad place and like, for example, like doctors don't know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that happens, right? Or doctors say, like, I have one friend, you know, they were basically telling her 30 years ago, like, oh, the only thing we can do is remove your bladder.
Wow.
It's like, that's the only thing you can do. There's no other way to treat this
Yeah.
condition, right? So if you're in a dead end sort of place where the only option you have seems to be not something that you want to go through with,
Yeah.
or, you know, or doctors have no clue what's going on with you,
Yeah.
I think that people, yeah, I think your advice is great there. Like, go within. There
Yeah.
might be a cause in there that you didn't expect to find that is actually behind all of these physical ailments.
Yeah. Yeah. And you may have like permanent. My mom got cancer, and we're all sure at this point that it was due to her guilt and shame issues living in her guts, and she got bowel cancer. So you like, there can be actual physical things that this does. Like it isn't just like that you feel sick and doctors can't figure it out, but it is like you can have, it can give you fucking cancer.
Yeah.
Like it can literally shut down your organs. It can do all kinds of crazy things. And we're living in a society now where there's trauma is so prevalent. I mean, the fact that for so long we were like, yeah, if your kids piss you off, just hit them. Just hit your kids if they piss you off.
Yeah.
That's fine. This is normal. Like we don't go around hitting adults if they piss us off. Why do we think it's okay to hit children if they piss us off? Like, especially because their brains are still forming. Their brains are still mushy. Like, of course they don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. They don't know how to human. Like, so I think so many of us were raised in what is effectively abusive households, but it's so normalized
Yeah.
that we don't even see it as abuse and we don't even recognize the trauma of that. I mean, science is now like psychology is now getting into like, oh yeah, hitting your kids has like severe psychological damage and it only makes things worse. Yelling at your kids, belittling and berating your kids, using shame and guilt as motivating factors, like, oh shit, all of these can have really
Long-term
bad
effects on them.
effects.
Yeah.
Yeah, like long-term effects.
Yeah.
The kind of relationship you have with your kids when they're young can indicate the kind of relationships they have as adults with other people.
Yeah.
So literally, like, I think we're all a little traumatized, like, at least in like American society. I can't speak to anybody anywhere else, but I think in American society, we're all a little bit traumatized. Those of us that are adults, at least at this point, I think hopefully it will get less and less with kids and as
Yeah.
generations go. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's just so much trauma and then so much emphasis put on just be logical and be rational. Don't feel your feelings. If or the feelings you feel, you're only allowed to feel like happy and positive and upbeat. Like you can't feel angry, you can't feel frustrated, you can't feel neglected, you can't feel victimized. Like I think that the trauma combined with thinking that way where we just don't let ourselves feel any of those feelings, I think is leading to this epidemic because so many people I know have crazy health problems that doctors are like, I don't know, like they can't really figure out what's going on. Like almost everybody I know has something weird going on that doctors can't provide any kind of answer for.
Wow.
And I think a lot of it is this repressed, undealt with trauma that
Yeah.
that's making us sick.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen it in my life as well. I know lots of people who, similar to what you're describing, they have certain health issues and
Yeah.
they go to the doctor, can't get help. They do research, can't get help. They try changing this, that, and the other thing, and like some things work, but not really.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, they either I don't know, have a dark night of the soul, or maybe they consume certain types of substances that allow them to go on a journey, and
Hmm.
boom, it's gone. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is, and they know, like people that I've known and that I've seen go through this, they know when they come out of it, they're like, this is why. And
Yeah.
I'm done with this. And all of a sudden it's like, they're better. It's like, holy
Yeah.
shit. And again, even 2 years ago, I would have thought, I was skeptical about that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you can, heal yourself through, through prayer and through meditation and manifestation, the law of attraction and all these things. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. But it's like, no, there's truth to those things. There's truth to them. And I've seen them firsthand now. So it's like, I can't deny it. And I might not
Yeah.
understand it, but yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you completely. We, and you've said this a few times already, we have neglected to remember that we are more than just our bodies, and we
Hmm.
are more than just our minds.
Yeah.
And we are also spirit. We're mind, body, and spirit. And if you have a problem in your body, that problem will have a mental and a spiritual component to it,
Yes.
period. And it may even originate in the mind or the spirit. And the body might just be the last thing to show signs of the problem,
Yeah.
or it could be the other way. It could start in the body, but then if you have a physical ailment, it's going to affect your mind and your spirit
Yeah.
because you're sick, you're not well, you're suffering. So any way you dice it, doesn't matter which way you approach it, you have to deal with the entire being. You can't just treat the body or just treat the symptoms, because where do they come from?
Yeah. 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 And we're so used to just treating the symptoms that we don't even look for the root of the problem. We just give you a pill for the symptoms.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
again, I think beneath a lot of this stuff, just to bring it back to the last topic, is a fear of death, and
Yeah.
an unacknowledged fear of death.
Yes.
Because why are we so afraid of being sick? Why do we want a pill for the headache? Why do we want a pill to reduce the fever? Even though fever is good for you, it's killing the virus. That it's your
Yeah.
body's way of attacking. But no, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to feel any discomfort. I don't want to feel any pain.
Yes.
I'm going to have a baby, put a needle in my spine,
Yeah.
slice me open, pull the baby out. I don't want to feel any discomfort or pain ever. Why? Because that is a symptom or a sign, or it's connected to, in our minds, it's connected to death,
Yeah.
right? If you get hurt, if you get injured, if you get sick, that could lead you to die. And God forbid that happens, because stay alive at all costs. That's your
Yeah.
biological programming. Stay alive at all costs.
Yeah.
And so when you confront death, and you, as you have done, right? It's like, oh, well, there are worse things in life than dying,
Yeah.
actually,
There really
right?
are. Yeah. Man, and one of the things I learned too was how like I'm now so grateful for my pain. Like, which is a thing I never thought I would say when I'm in the middle of it. I'm so grateful for it. There's so many lessons in pain and in suffering that can really only be taught through pain and suffering. Like, yeah, my body had been screaming at me for years that something was wrong, and I kept not looking at it. And so it literally got to the point where it was like, okay, I'm going to debilitate you and force you to look at this.
Yeah, turn
Yeah,
up the
and ramp,
volume on the pain until you can't
yeah,
ignore it anymore. Yeah.
yep, really ramp that pain up. And there were so many lessons in that pain. Like I mean, the pain is one of the things that really, really facilitated like my most recent like spiritual awakening, like, and really getting in touch with myself, getting in touch with spirit, getting in touch with so many things. Like it was through that pain. Yeah, and yet, yeah, we run so hard from it. We do everything we can to try to avoid being in pain, including even when feelings come up that we don't like, we're just like,
Yeah,
like shove that down, just ignore it, just pretend it's not there. I don't want to feel any amount of discomfort.
that's right.
Yeah, when really, yeah, there's so many lessons in pain. So much growth and evolution can happen because of pain. And yeah, and I mean that and shoving that all down, clear, like it can kill you.
Yeah, oh,
But
for
also,
sure.
you just never, you can't learn, you can't evolve, you can't grow, and you'll continue running into those same situations that cause you that same amount of pain
Why does this
until
always
you
happen to
learn it,
me, Deanna? Why does this always happen to me?
right?
It's
Oh
like
my
there's a
God.
common denominator in all of those
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know a nice way to tell you it's you, but
You might be part of the problem, not the
yeah.
whole problem, but you might be part of it. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, totally agree. Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. Like you can even see it in like I know certain people who, like, maybe they want to lose weight and stuff like that, right? But then you go to the gym, or you break, like I have a gym at my house. It's like, come over, work out with me. I'll help you build up a habit or whatever. Me and my wife work out every day. Like, just come over. And it's like they might come over once, and then they're sore the next day, and it's like, actually I can't come this time. And then, you know what I mean? Or like, I need a
Yeah.
personal trainer to motivate me. I can't just go to the gym on my own, because then I won't follow through. So I need to like pay a personal trainer to motivate me, because it's uncomfortable, especially when you're starting
Yeah.
out. It's pain, right? It is a
Yeah.
pain. Your muscles ache, your back hurts, whatever. It's like, but
Yeah.
that's good pain. That's pain
Yeah.
that's leading you to be better and stronger. So not all pain is bad, but we kind of have this blanket view of all pain being bad and avoid it at all costs.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Yep. Yeah. Avoid it at all costs. And yeah, we lose. Yeah, if you never go to the gym, or if you go, even if you're going to the gym and you never get sore, like your gains are real low. Like
Yeah, better
you
than
gotta,
nothing, but
yeah, yeah, you gotta like push it a little bit. Like
yes.
that is what prompts growth and what prompts change is once you get uncomfortable. It's the only reason that like a snake sheds its skin, or a lizard is gets so uncomfortable in that
Right.
skin that's too small. If they never shed that skin, they would just stay uncomfortable in that in too small forever. Like you
Yeah, they can
have to
never
shed that
grow.
skin. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You get uncomfortable enough that you change something. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So crazy that we're trying to avoid the very thing that's trying to show us the way, it's like,
Yeah.
because it is, right? I mean, like, the pain in your case was a message from your
Yeah.
body, right? And it
Yeah.
often is. I mean, it always is. All pain is a
Yep.
message. It's like, hey, there's something happening on your
Yeah.
arm. You might want to take care of that, or else you're going to lose it. Like, it's like your body's messages. But
Yeah.
yeah, we tend to just think like, I don't want to hear the message. It doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. I
Yep.
don't want to feel it. And that just causes it to become more and more intense. So it's like, if you
Yeah.
really don't want to feel pain, you should listen to pain, and you should
Yep.
try to learn from it, like you're saying, because otherwise, if you just try to ignore it, it's just gonna get turned up until you can't
Yeah.
ignore it anymore. And that's the worst. Like, you don't want to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Pushing yourself till you're debilitated from it. Yeah. Or yeah, if you find yourself in the same situations over and over, encountering the same kind of pain, like Yeah, like you got to stop at some point and be like, okay, yeah, I'm the common denominator here.
Yeah.
What
Well,
am
it's
I not?
patterns,
What
right?
am I not learning? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you're a part of the pattern, and if you keep doing the same thing, you're just reinforcing the same pattern. If you want to break the pattern, you have to do something differently.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you're to blame or it's all your fault if you're finding yourself in these situations. It just means that you're in a pattern, and learn to recognize that pattern and your part in it, and then you'll be able to break that pattern and create something new,
Yeah.
hopefully something better,
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
painful perhaps, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, wow,
Man.
fascinating stuff,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
You got a lot to say, my friend, and I love chatting with you. I'm glad that we finally were
You
able to
know.
connect a second time.
Yeah, me too. Oh,
Yeah.
um, oh, a cool story I did want to share, like related to death and kind of breaking patterns. And I just want, like, I want to share this in case anybody else has the same kind of thing come up. Um, so my grandma died, in January of 2021. Um, and before she died, like she'd been in a rough place for months. Like we knew she was going to go. She was at hospice, at her home. Um, and so it was like when the time was getting closer, like I knew I would be there when she died, like weeks beforehand. Like my mom kept calling me like in panics, like, oh no, she's gonna go, you might want to get, because she lives about 4 hours south of me, my mom and my grandparents. And so and every time she would call, I would just be like, mom, it's okay, like it's okay, it's not time yet, like I know that, like I'm going to be there when she goes,
And
like.
how did you know that? You just have a feeling?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I just knew it. I just knew that when
Yeah.
she died, I would be there.
Wow.
Um, and so then when the time was like coming, and like my time all of a sudden like opened up, so I had no commitments or anything, and it was like, okay, this is the time now. Like now I gotta go. So I went down there. Um, and I was down there for about a week. She died on like day five, day four I was there, I think. Um, and it, like that experience in and of itself ended up being like fucking magical, which is not a thing I ever would have like going down. I had some trepidation. I'd never been there when someone died before. I'd been around bodies, but I'd never been there when someone died, and I was kind of scared. Like I was having a lot of weird anxiety about it. I really didn't know. I knew I needed to be there, but I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this. um and it was the whole time I was down there was like this deep calm. Um, and then
Like you
when,
felt a deep calm, or was it just
yes,
deep calm all over the house, or
yeah, all over the house, like everyone there. There was a lot of family. I have a lot of that side of my family is huge, and a lot of them live nearby, and so there was a lot of family in and out. My grandparents, their four daughters, were staying there, and then me and one of my other cousins were staying there. Um, and the night she actually died, like, and yeah, so yeah, it was this really like beautiful, loving environment, and with this very like grounded energy. And my grandma was the matriarch of our family. She was the anchor. She was like, everybody loved this woman. And the night she died, it was me and my mom were sleeping in my grandparents' bed. My grandpa was sleeping in a chair next to her, holding her hand on the hospice bed. Um, and at like just about 1 in the morning, I woke up choking out of nowhere, like just like choked myself awake. And my mom was like, what was that? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm fine. But then my cousin came in and she was like, it's time, like she's going. Like, so weirdly, I woke up just before she was going.
yeah.
So then we all went into the living room where her hospice bed was set up. And like we all just encircled her. People, like, we were holding her hands. I was down at her feet. I was holding her feet. And I had just like the most beautiful experience with it, where all of a sudden, like, I mean, I'm holding her feet and I'm meditating and I'm just trying to send her as much like loving energy as I can. Oh man. Oh, I didn't think I was gonna cry. And I got very clearly this image of her like appearing before me, and she de-aged she was 92, so she de-aged into like 20 years old, in front of me. And and then this door behind her opened up, like a doorway of light, and through it was her mother, my great grandma, who then it hit me. That's how death appears to me, as my great grandmother. And and um, and so I was with her, and then she, like, as she was going, like, she looked through the doorway, and I told her, I was like, this is where you're going. This is, like, she's here for you. We're all here for you. And she danced through that door. It was so beautiful, like, so beautiful and so powerful. And then, I mean, and then there were a few, like, gasping breaths, and she was gone. And it was like, and immediately I was so grateful for that experience, like, more grateful for that than I've been for a lot of things in my life. And even, like, days before, if you told me, like, oh, you're gonna be real grateful for death in a few days, I would have been like, get the fuck out of here. Like, no. But it was just this incredible experience. And then we did a completely non-traditional thing, which I was also really uncomfortable with in the beginning, where we kept her body at the house for about 3 days, which is not a thing people normally do anymore. As soon as someone's dead,
Yep.
you call the coroner, you get them out of your house, you get them away from you. You know, we don't, like, even doing wakes, like, when you view a body, it's been so preserved and made up. It doesn't look like a body. It doesn't look right anymore. It doesn't look like, it just looks weird.
Looks like a doll.
Yeah, it looks wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, my aunts had all decided that that's what we were, and they had talked to her about it before she went, and she was okay with this. So we had this, they had everything prepared. They had these like big packets of ice that the hospice place had brought over, and so we packed her with ice. And then we moved her into this little, like, entry room, like foyer room, and kept her there for days, for like 3 days. But it really, like, having her there as her shell, as her human shell, was so good for everyone. Like, that in and of itself was such a beautiful experience. Me and my cousin spent time, like, we did do a little bit of makeup on her. We fixed her hair a little bit. You know, we, like, kind of, like, put some clothes on her, like, dressed her up a little bit. But just, like, handling a body, being around a body, like, again, we're so, like, we disconnect ourselves from death by just pushing it away as soon as we can. As soon as it's there, we just want to put it back in this little scary box where we don't have to see it, we don't have to think about it, we don't have to be around it. But being with the body was such a powerful experience. And caring for the body was such a powerful experience. And again, these are both things. If somebody had told me beforehand, like, you're going to be handling your grandma's body and you're going to love it, I would have been like, no, no, no. No, no, no. Like, I never would have thought. Me and my cousin talked about this afterwards, how it was something that made us uncomfortable when our aunts told us we were going to be keeping her there. We were immediately kind of uncomfortable with the idea.
Yeah.
Because that's just not, you're just not prepared for that. That's just not what we do in our culture. And so it did weird me out at first when they told me about it, but once we were actually doing it, I was like, nope, this is perfect. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. Like, we should be caring for our dead. And something psychologically too it does for you. I've had other people in my life die, and been to their funerals and such, but something about being with the body, like, I don't know, it felt like, instead of leaving, it was like reading a book and leaving the last chapter unread. This felt like reading the chapter. Like, this felt like the completion of
Closure,
it. Like,
yeah.
like real closure with it.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, that's, if anybody listening is open to that or wants to think about that for themselves in the future, just let that simmer in you. Like, just feel that idea out, because it really, especially I feel like, if you're afraid of death, something about being around it, it's not nearly as scary as you think it's going to be.
Yeah, it
And there is,
demystifies it a bit.
yeah, it takes away that mystery. And you, there's that space there for you to see how beautiful it is, like how much beauty and power there is. And then it makes you look at the whole rest of the living world in a different way. Like you really do. I mean, every time someone dies, you appreciate being alive more. But there was something about like being with that body, that shell, that really like just makes everything in the living world different. Um, and yeah, and that helped solidify like being even more okay with death and feeling more and more like a friend of death, and
Mm,
making that space for death a little wider in myself. Um, like at this point, I have plans to become a death doula. Um, is
yeah,
my next like life path
that's
kind of
awesome.
choice that I'm gonna go down, because it was, yeah, just so beautiful and so powerful. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I want everybody to like to experience what I experienced, so that there's less of this fear and this
Yeah.
stigma, and like this, yeah, this pain associated with death when it really doesn't have to be that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I mean, like, you touched on it already when you talked about being a death doula. Birth and death are things that
Mhm.
we all must pass through.
Yeah.
There's no avoiding it. It's
Yeah.
they're the great equalizers. They're the great connective tissue that makes us all one, because we all pass through birth and we all have to die eventually. And so for me, it's like, birth and death shouldn't be taking place in a place where you patch up somebody who's been shot. If
Yeah.
you can avoid it, sometimes if there's conditions and there's circumstances, obviously the hospital is the
Yeah.
best place for you.
Yeah.
But at home births and what you just
Yeah.
described with your mother transition or your grandmother transitioning at home surrounded by loved ones, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful death. And that's
Yeah.
what we should all be looking forward to, not rushing towards it,
Yeah.
but when my time comes, that's how I want to die. That's what you just
Yeah.
described is exactly how and I would love to be there for my loved ones, parents, in-laws, elderly friends that I have.
Yeah.
I would be honored to be there for them as they transition the way that
Yeah.
you were there for your grandmother. So, again, unsurprisingly, I don't find your story weird at all. I think it's beautiful. I think it's um yeah, it's what I would want for myself and what I would want to be there for other
Yeah.
people. So thank you for sharing it and for being vulnerable. And I mean, I got teary eyed for sure. And she's not my grandmother. So yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful story.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for listening and being open to this. Like, yeah, man. Yeah. And since this happened, like I've talked about this so much and I freaking cry like every time. Keep thinking
It's
eventually
good.
I won't cry when I tell this story, um but something about it like makes me want to share this with people. Like I don't know, because I guess because it is so like counter to what we when we see death portrayed too, it's like violent, it's scary, it's big, it's like ah, like this, I don't know this. And yeah, and something about like taking charge of your own death and the death of your loved ones, like really, like I want to make my death my own. I want to die how I want to die,
Yes.
like
On my terms.
ideally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I want to die, yeah, just like my grandma did, surrounded by loved ones in your own home. Like
Yeah.
it really
Tripping
doesn't get
balls
better,
on LSD like Aldous Huxley.
right?
I always like that.
Oh my God.
With my loved ones reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead while I'm tripping balls. That's how I want to die. It's like,
That's
all right,
adorable.
guys, I'm ready. Give me the
Yeah.
mushrooms. Open the book up. It's time to go. And
I
speaking of
love
the
it.
Tibetan Book of the Dead, the way that you guys kept your grandmother around and honored her after she had passed, in that Tibetan Book of the Dead, in that tradition, you're not done. Like
Yeah.
they do that in that tradition because you're traveling and they have to keep reading to you and they have to keep supporting you, because even though the body
Yeah.
is dead, the spirit is still migrating. And
Yeah.
so there's this whole huge elaborate ritual around it where you read this entire book out. It takes days to go through the ritual. And whether you believe it's true or not, all the bardo states that you go through and all this stuff doesn't matter. The point is, it creates a ritual around it and it helps you integrate death, which is what you're
Yeah.
describing, right? Like you're saying,
Yeah.
it wasn't like you left the last chapter out. No, you read the whole book. that's the integration, right? It's not like they died and then you just, okay, bury them and then never think about it
Yeah.
again, except when you're in a bad place and you start crying and you're full of grief. Like your
Yeah.
tears were tears of, just now, correct me if I'm wrong, they seemed like they were tears of joy and like of
Yeah.
remembering this beautiful thing in your life. It wasn't like you're crying out of pain and grief and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it's not
so
they're not grief tears. It's remembering the beauty of that literally makes me cry. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and the vision that you had of her and de-aging and going through that doorway and stuff is like, holy fuck, dude. That's some powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've run the gauntlet, my friend. I think we hit it from
Did all
religion
the
to
things.
psychedelics to death, all the way back around a couple times. We probably did a few laps. I think this was an awesome conversation.
It was awesome. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And thank you again for sharing that story. It was beautiful and powerful. And I hope that people hear it, and I hope that they it changes their perception of death and
Yeah.
how we can treat death in our society. Because yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a disease like birth. It's not a disease. It's not an illness.
Yeah.
It's the most natural, inevitable thing, period, for a human
Yeah.
being. It's, you know,
Yeah.
behooves us to try to repress it and ignore it.
Right. Stop repressing and ignoring anything. That's the theme
Yes.
of today. Just
Yeah.
feel your feelings, get it out. Just
Yeah.
don't suppress or exile any of the things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, great. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, good parting words. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch with you soon and put this out there in a couple weeks.